Hey there, you're watching the Dave Does channel, and today it's not a Dave Does Reacts or anything like that. It's actually Dave Does Tries to Explain. There we go. There. So on a recent video, I was doing a video where I was explaining I was doing some new music and how I go through the process of writing tracks for Telescribe, previous bands Nothing Gained, and how as a band we kind of get songs together. And we do these tracks and we send them out, and then some songs don't get used in that particular band, and I decided to use them in my sort of solo project thing called Project 42. And I used the terminology I was guide tracking, and someone messaged me on one of the social platforms and sort of said, that's not guide tracking, you were demoing. Which is true, and I want to go through the difference, but I was also guide tracking in a way. In my mind, I was guide tracking my demo. So that there's a kind of, so it's just wanting to clarify to help people out when people talk about terminology of what is the difference between guide tracking and demoing. And really, it's the purpose of the song. So a demo, for instance, will be one person coming together with an idea of a track. That demo usually will not be what the finished song is going to sound like. It will be a rough approximation, so some of the riffs may stay the same, they might be tidied up, there might be changes to it, and it will start off usually with one person demoing out a track, and then maybe multiple people will get involved. So a good example of this would be like if you talked about Metallica, James and Lars will demo out a track, and they might put a kind of rough lead guitar part in there, etc., and they will demo it to a point where the rest of the band can go, okay, yeah, cool, we can learn that. Then they take it into a studio and they play it, and then they get what is the actual track. So they'll then mess around with it, they'll tweak ideas, they'll tweak riffs out. So the demo is really just a very basic first draft. It's the first draft of the idea to send around for people to work on. Now, demos from bands back in the day, back in the everything up to the 90s, were used for getting record deals, because record deals were obviously the main way of getting your music out there. This is no longer really applicable. So nowadays, bands have to effectively do their own recordings. In most cases, demos are just not acceptable to put out there. Your quality of your recording has to be much higher than a demo standard, even in your own days. And now we put it all out on streaming platforms like Spotify, etc. So it's gone past the stage where a demo is really anything you would give out to the public. You would use it mainly, as I said, as an idea for getting a track together or getting an idea. Now, in the case of what I was doing, where I said I was putting my ideas down, that is in a case a demo still, because it's not something that idea that I played on that track is not something I would be putting out to the general public. Obviously I did, because it was on my YouTube channel, but it was more as an example of what I'm working on. So that is a demo, it's not the final idea. However, my terminology of saying it's a guide track is true. So why do we talk about guide tracks? Well, the guide tracks are used primarily when you go into a studio for recording an album, an EP or a single. So what you do is you go in as a band. Ideally, this is what you should do. You'll go in as a band. You'll have the tempo guides. So your mixing sound engineer will sit there with each of your tracks. Now, you should hopefully know what the BPM is, the beats per minute, for a click track, if you're recording to a click. Now, if you're not recording to a click, it becomes a little bit more of an issue with the guide track, and you generally would then only guide the drums would be the guide for the rest of the band afterwards, but you wouldn't have a pre-guide. Generally, you'll have the guitarist will usually go in with the drummer ahead of time, unless the drummer says I don't need the other instruments, but generally drummers would like to have some other instrumentation to play off. So what you do is you have the BPM. If you haven't recorded anything ahead of time to a BPM, the engineer will get a BPM for you. He'll get you to play the song and then go, right, well, that's the BPM I'm counting at we go. So we'll set that as your click track. The band will go in and you will record as a band in whole, so everyone's mic'd up, and it will get a room sound, so you'll get all your guitars set up. And sometimes people will use these as actual recordings, but generally you'll use these as a guide track. Everyone goes in, you play drums, guitar, bass, vocals, and you do all your basic tracks, and these are your guide tracks. Because what you'll then have is, after you've done all that, you'll then start usually with the drums. Like 99% of the times it will be the drummer that'll come back in. Now, for the drummer, rather than asking for the guitarist to come back in, will then get that mix that they did in the guide track played back with the click track and just have all the drums taken out. So you then as a drummer have got something you can play to. So you've still got all that instrumentation coming back in through your headphones, you can play your track, and then that is you locked in. And then when the guitarist then will next come in, so it'll either be bass or guitars that will come in next, and these will be rhythm guitars, and they will play not to the guide tracks, they will then play to the drummer track. So guide tracks are really just efficient for the drummer. Now sometimes the guide tracks will also then be given to the vocalists, so they've got a really good mix of song with no vocals on, so they can then work on their vocals, because they're going to be the last one usually coming in to do, or maybe the soloist might be, but they get given these tracks as kind of a way of working. Now usually I would say if you're at the stage where you need that, you probably shouldn't have gone in the studio for recording, because you don't usually have that period of time. But if you have multiple weeks in the studio and you're doing a couple of days or a day at a time and then coming back after a couple of weeks to the next person, it can be quite useful to have these layers of tracks. But generally at this point you'll then have guitarists will come in, they will play to the drummer, and then you may go, well, why can't the guitarist just come in? If you're going to be playing to a click track anyway, why not have the guitarist and bass player record that and then just have the drummer come in? They've got the click track there, the drummer can then just play with the guitars from the click track. The reason behind this is the drummer is never going to be 100% dead on the click. If you're playing live drums, you're always going to be slightly ahead or slightly behind. You're never going to be dead on. Now guitarists, however, when they're playing to a click track, will usually get pretty dead on with their impact. So they might be straight on the impact, but when you get a drummer comes in and he's slightly off, what you're going to get is a very sloppy take. So that's why you want the guitarist to follow the drums, not necessarily the click. The click is there just a guidance for points where there is periods of silence in a song, or transitions, or where it's just guitar only, stuff like that. The rest of the time you really just want your guitarist to follow what the drums is doing, because this will give you you're going to get a little bit of push and pull versus the click tracks. You never want to do that, otherwise you have to do what we've had to do in the past, which is where we've had that problem happen in my old band Nothing Gained. You have to do what's called quantizing, and that is where you take all the hits and you drag the hits in line with a click, and this causes you problems with cymbal bounce, snare bounce, anything that can be picked up on another microphone. So toms and kick drums are generally okay, but what happens with the snare is if you drag the snare, you'll get a bit of ringing from the cymbal, so you have to then drag cymbals, and cymbals are bouncing, so it's an absolute nightmare if you need to do that. So generally get it right first, use a guide tracker there, and that will work. Now you might then say, so why did I use the terminology excuse me oh god, I've talked for so long I started sneezing. It's because it's winter here. So you can ask the question, so why did I use the guide track terminology when I was really doing demos? Purely so that I can remember what I was working with. So I put it as a guide to remind myself of what I've been playing, because if I just did a rough, I could call it a demo if you like, but I put my rhythm guitar down to guide me for the next section. It's also there for my drums, so that when I'm playing the drums I can kind of go, now that I've done a demo drums, I will use the guitar part that I've laid down to see if I can accent certain parts. So again, I use them as guides in my demo till I get to the point where I'm happy. So I'm actually building the recorded track as I go. So I'm almost tracking at the same time. So I'm just keep recording, but I'm still messing with the idea. And the way I like to do these songs is I will go away I will record it, and I'll get a good take of it, and that's what's going through my head. I won't then try and sit there for the next 20 minutes, 30 minutes, hour trying to refine it, because I've got this riff. I'll have that riff in my head, and I won't be able to really go anywhere else unless something miraculously happens. If I go back the next day, or I go back several hours later after recording, I'll pick the guitar up again and something new will come to mind, and I'll get a different vibe or a different feel, and that's where my riffs evolve and the songs will evolve. So I like to write songs over multiple days, multiple weeks, to see where they come out, but don't try and force it. So a song can take anything up to like a year to come together. If it's just not working, just don't force it, and that's the way you go through. But there you go, that's my description of what a demo and a guide is. Now I'm sure there might be people out there that will go, no, that's wrong. Please do let me know, because that's my understanding and that's how I've always used the terminology when I've gone into the studio with bands to record albums, etc. So, and obviously in our demo process. But if you weren't aware of that, there you go. That's the difference, the main difference between doing a demo track versus a guide track. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you on a video sometime very soon. Take care.